Hi, everyone. I'm Connie Szabo-Schmucker, Advocacy Director at Bicycle Garage Indy. Welcome to the Bicycling Lunch and Learn. This is our final Lunch and Learn for 2024. We start them back up in February. So the next couple months, we'll be looking at what topics we want to cover. So if there's any topics that you're interested in that we haven't covered, or want to see some old favorites like some of the ones that have been very popular, go ahead and put those in the chat during this presentation, or you can shoot me an email with ideas, and the group will look at those over the winter. So this program is a program of the Cycle Commuter Task Force, which is Bike Indianapolis, Bicycle Garage Indy, Commuter Connect, and Central Indiana Bicycling Association. We also have one more event this year, which is Ride to the Polls. On Saturday, November 2nd, we're going to have staffed parking at Luger Plaza for early voting on the Saturday before the election. So Saturday, November 2nd from 11 to 2, we'll have staff parking, and, exercise your right to vote and ride your bike and have fun doing it. Bring your friends. And I think that's all I've got as far as announcements. Please keep yourselves muted. We may put any questions you might have or comments you might have in the chat, and we'll cover those either during the presentation, if that makes sense, or afterwards. And we'll probably have some time afterwards for additional tips that others might want to share who are attending. And I think we're doing this in perfect timing because next week is going to be really cold, like highs 20 degrees colder than we are right now. So I'm looking forward to hearing again from Roy. He is our expert on riding in the cold and dark. He's done this presentation and added additional information, and is a great source of resource for this topic specifically, as well as other topics. So I'm going to turn this over to Roy Sparks. And so Roy, go ahead and take it away.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Hopefully you're enjoying some kind of lunch today. I am a avid cyclist, of course. Only avid cyclist would ride in the cold and dark. I have started riding back in 2006. And as it would have it, today I should break 60,000 miles commuting. I got like 4 miles left to go to break 60,000 miles today for my cycling career. I ride all year long, every month of the year. I am also a bike commuter. I ride to work. Um, Probably when the weather's nice, at least 3 times a week. I moved to Indianapolis in 2006 and have been bike commuting every month of the year since that time. So I probably have over, last time I checked at the end of last month, I had like 670 commutes since 2006. And so, as you can imagine, most of that does occur in the dark, one way or the other, whether it's in the morning or coming. Once we hit the winter solstice, sunset goes to about 4:20. FYI, I'm riding home in the dark too. So that said, we're going to cover some of the tips that I have that I've learned over the last 8 years or so in riding in the cold and dark, particularly commuting to and from work. So we're going to cover what I call the 4 L's of riding in the cold and dark. We're going to talk a little bit about layers. We're going to talk about lights. We're going to talk about some of the logistic considerations you may want to give when preparing for riding in the cold and dark. And then the last one is learning to love it. I actually enjoy it. I don't find it bothersome at all. It does take more preparation, which we'll cover the logistics part of it. But it is actually an enjoyable experience riding, especially early in the morning when you may have this trail to yourself. So layers. One of the resources that I uncovered a few years ago, there's a company called 45 North out of Minnesota, and they actually have a very good link here where they talk about and give suggestions on what to wear at various temperature levels. And let's see if I can jump over there real quick, just so you all can see it. Yeah, so they have um, just general tips here based on temperature. So you can click on these links for various temperature ranges that you are going to be considering it riding in. I can tell you in Indiana, probably over the winter months and fall months, in the early spring, you're going to be in the 25 to 45-degree range. Currently, right now, we're at the 45-degree range. I want to say I think it was 47 this morning. But as Connie alluded to, I think Tuesday morning, we're looking at 36 degrees at 6 a.m. Oops, hold on here. Let me get back. So this is a good link, a good resource, gives you a lot of good suggestions on items you may want to consider wearing and riding in those temperature ranges. One of the things that is key is keeping a log of sorts on what works for you. Everybody, cold tolerance is different. Everybody has different sweat rates. Um, and so the clothing that works for you at a particular temperature range, it's good to write that down, kind of keep a log. So next year you do not forget, because believe it or not, over the course of 12 months, um, this happened to me the first couple years. I would be like, what was it I was wearing again? Was I wearing a long sleeve base layer or short sleeve base layer? And so keeping a log is a good idea. In order to kind of defray expenses, you could try using gear you already own. So if you're a runner or you're a skier, um, try using the gear you already own and seeing if that works for you, trial and error. And if it does, great. If you want to buy new pieces, you can buy those off season. So unfortunately, that's already passed. So typically, off season will start in March, and you'll start seeing sales from various, Castelli or whoever. Um, and so that would be the time of year, especially if it's you want to get winter bibs or something like that. That's when you want to start looking for sales on winter clothing. Is probably like March and April, especially if there's a particular size you're interested in. And one of the things you'll learn quickly is not to overdress. Sweat is your enemy. And so you want to dress um, enough to keep you warm, slightly chilled, possibly, is how I would describe it. Understanding that once you walk out of your house or your garage or whatever, once you start cycling, for me, it takes about 2 miles. Your body temperature will start to go up. So you do not want to dress for the moment you walk outside of your house. You want to anticipate, hey, what am I going to feel like 2 miles down the road? So gloves, gloves are kind of the holy grail of winter cycling, to be honest. Finding the glove combination that works for you. Um, I I have a couple different sets of gloves I use based on temperature. So typically, when it's weather like it was this morning, when it's in the mid 40s, I just wear a long fingered glove that doesn't really have any insulation, does have some gel padding on the palms, but I wear a smart wool glove liner with those. Then I find that works really well for me. My fingers don't get cold, um, and that's what I use. When the temperatures are in the mid 40s. Um, Once it gets below 40 degrees, that's when I find that combination doesn't work for me. I have an hour commute, and so uh, by the time I get to work, my hands are starting to get cold if I don't have heavier glove on once it drops below 40 degrees. Other things that I found with glove selection, you don't want your gloves to be tight. So most glove sizes are measured by inches around the circumference of the knuckle part of your hand. So if you measure that with one of the cloth tape measures, if the average glove size in the United States is a 9, so 9 inches is typical, and make sure you don't get your gloves too tight. Unfortunately, if you're ordering them online, it's kind of a trial and error. Order a glove that you think is going to fit, but if you're in between sizes right at that border, you might have to return them and get a different size. But tight fit causes the blood in your hands to get pushed out, and that's going to make your hands colder. So you don't want tight gloves. That's a bad thing. The other thing I found that if you over grip your handlebars, same thing happens. So if you don't have a good fit and you're over gripping your handlebars, it's going to push the blood out of your hands and you're going to get cold hands. There are some options. I got some links here at the bottom of these slides so you can refer to these um, after the presentation when Connie posts it, with some suggestions on equipment that I use. Another option is to use bar mitts or pogies. I do not use those because I want to be able to move my hands around the handlebars, whether they're on the hoods or on the top. I want to be able to move my hands around. So if you put a pogie, it attaches to your handlebars and you slide your hands in them, um, then you can't move your hands around. You got to keep them on your hoods, for example. So I know there are some people that love those, but I don't. I don't particularly use them, so I don't have much experience with them. But I've heard they're quite effective. I have a couple of commuting people that I ride with, buddies that use those, and they seem to like them. I think they use the bar mitt. These are brands, by the way. Bar mitt is a brand. Pogie is a general term that's used. If you live up north, they're called pogies, just so you know. So on the head coverings, so on to ride like today, where it was in the mid 40s, basically I have, like a head sweats head beanie that I wear in the summer. I just add a buff over the top of that, and that's great for me for my hour plus commute into work. Once it gets down below 40, that's when I find that instead of using that like summer head sweats type of beanie, I need to switch over to I got a smart wool beanie that I wear, and it works great. It keeps wool is great for winter commuting. It retains more of a thermal property when it gets wet, and so that's a great material to use in your any of your kit is merino wool. Once it gets down in the 25-degree range, the 35-degree range, this is where I find that I lose all my buddies. All my cycling companions seem to stop once we get down to the below 30. So I'm often riding by myself at that point. But once we get down in that, I start adding layers onto that wool beanie. And even if I'm below 25 degrees, I have a particular wool beanie made by 45 North called the stovepipe hat that I'll put on, and it is super warm. I do not use a helmet cover, but that is an option. So if you want to use a helmet cover, it'll be a trial and error on what you want to wear underneath it. But that is another option to keep that cold wind off the vents of your helmet.
Roy,
The
we
other
have
thing,
a question.
sure.
How do you wear those in concert with your helmet?
So I was just getting ready to say that, Connie. So I have two different size helmets. Boom, boom. Right. So I have a unique, unfortunately, if you're familiar with helmet sizing at all, the break off circumference of your head between a medium and a large is typically 59 centimeters. And my head is 59 centimeters. So what I end up doing is I can wear a medium if I just have that standard summer type of moisture wicking beanie to keep the sweat out of my eyes, like this head sweats one. I can wear a medium in the summer, no problem. I can even wear that medium helmet with it if I have the summer beanie and the buff. But if I go beyond that, then I got to get my large helmet out and wear my large helmet. So that's how I handle it. So you'll need to be aware of that, right? How close are you to the max circumference of the size helmet you have? So if you're close like me, No, I got the bad news is you're probably going to have two different size helmets to be able to likely to be able to ride comfortably once it gets down into the 30s. Okay. That's just the sad part about me is I get kind of hosed over with the helmet sizes. And that also means I have to try every helmet on before I buy it. I can't just buy a size off the internet or whatever to save money. I actually have to go in and try it on. So again, at the bottom of this screen, you're going to see links to various pieces of clothing that I own and wear and use, except for the helmet. Socks. So when you get down to your feet, there's two ways you can handle it. You can take the approach of, hey, I'm just going to wear my summer shoe, and I'm just going to manage the cold with, trying to fit a sock that works with the shoe, a wool sock, and putting shoe covers on. So um, I did that for the first few years I was commuting, and it works out okay. In that philosophy, I have specific smart wool socks that I wear um, when it gets down into the 40s. But once it really gets down, like around 40 into the 30s, I have a wool winter sock. There's a couple companies out there that make those. The links at the bottom of the screen um, that you can wear, and they work with my summer shoe. Um, then when it gets down into with the summer shoe, I find that at some point you need to put a shoe cover on. And what I did is they make neoprene covers depending on the style of shoe you're wearing that you can put over the top, or you can even put rain shoe covers. If you like, say for example, if you're using flat pedal shoes, which is what I do, I don't clip in it. I quit doing that several years ago because when I go through downtown the Cultural Trail, you're stopping every couple of minutes at a stoplight, clip in, clip out, and you're trying to clip back in as you're crossing a crosswalk and dodging people. And it was just too much of a pain. So I use flat pedal shoes and flat pedals, by the way, on all my commuter bikes. So you can use a rain shoe cover. Showers Pass makes one. I use that for several seasons. Um, if it gets super cold, you can add toe covers to your shoe that you would wear underneath like a rain cover. And then I find that if I get down into the 20s, I always go buy a bag of chemical toe warmers that have the sticky adhesive on one side, and I stick that inside the shoe cover. Um, and that really helps a lot. And ironically, they last me, you know, they're effective for my whole commute. By the time I get to work, I'm still good. The alternative to that is you could get some winter insulated shoes. So they've made several. If you're wearing flat pedal shoes, you could even, if you have a hiking shoe that you like, is comfortable and works out well, try it riding, see if it's comfortable. Um, by all means, use that if you like. There are companies that make cycling specific winter shoes. Castelli makes a shoe. Lake, I think there's a company called Lake that makes one, and I know that 45 North makes them as well. They're just insulated winter cycling shoes, and they can be super expensive too, by the way. So if you want to go that route, you got the money to buy those and want to try them, go for it. Um, so those are your options. Torso coverings. So I'm a big fan of the wool, as I mentioned before. I use merino wool. Smart Wool makes some great stuff. Typically, most of my base layers, I have a short sleeve base layer, uh, and I have long sleeve base layer. Um, Typically, once it gets down the 40s, I also have wool long sleeve bike jerseys. I've got a couple of those that I wear once it gets down to the 40s. And so, like for today, when it was 47, I had a short sleeve wool base layer, long sleeve wool jersey, and then I put a light vest, nylon vest shell over the top of that. And I was fine coming in this morning with that combination. So you'll just have to, whatever works for you, a combination of short sleeve, long sleeve. What I typically do is always wear the short sleeve base layer. I'll typically add the long sleeve base layer when it gets down into the 30s, and use the long sleeve jersey in the 30s, and then eventually once I get down below the 30s, um, I'll add a light insulated jacket or shell over the top of that once I get down below 30, to help keep me warm. The other thing I've learned is, because different people have different sweat rates, and so you need to be careful not to overdress. You want to try to minimize sweating. For me, that's almost impossible. And so, one of the things I've noted is once you get to the jacket, the shell on the outside of your jersey, you have to be very mindful when that happens, because if you start sweating, one of the things you'll note is, uh, you can't really take that shell off. You have to leave it buttoned up like a Dutch oven, because if you, like, for example, stop at a coffee shop on the way to work, which I've done and enjoy doing, that's my reward for riding to work. Sometimes I stop and get a, a provider there at 16th Street. I'll stop, get a cup of coffee, stay there for like 10, 15 minutes, and then go on to work. I got another 4 miles past that. And, you know, once you start sweating and you take that shell off, you'll get cold real quick. And so, if you do start sweating, just remember, hey, keep the shell on, keep moving. You'll be okay. But if you stop and or take that shell off, that's when you're going to get really cold really quick. Leg coverings. So, like today, I wore a winter knicker, bib knicker, goes down just below my knees, and I wore winter socks, um, 45 degrees, and that was great. That combination works well for me, well down into um, below freezing. Once I get below 30, I will consider adding um, rain pants over the top of that combination, just to keep the prevent the wind chill factor from making me too cold. So usually once I get down into the upper 20s, that's when I'll add I got a pair of showers pass rain pants, and I'll add those over the top of my winter bibs, and that works well for me. Okay, that's the clothing portion of the presentation. Now we'll talk about lights. So I've learned a few things that are important to remember, especially if you're riding by yourself. Um, I use handlebar mounted lights. Light and motion are the lights I use. I typically will have two. I always have two lights, whether I need to or not. I always have two. These lights are rechargeable. The one thing you're going to find out fast is the battery performance can vary as the temperature drops, and that's part of the reason why I always take two. So if you start a ride and you look and you're in your garage and your garage is 40 degrees and your battery's relatively warm because of that, but you didn't recharge it and say it's at 50% charge, and you start riding, as that battery starts to get cold during your ride, especially if you got a longer commute like me. It's, like I said, it's 13 miles, which takes me about an hour with all the stoplights and everything. As that battery gets cold, its performance drops. And so you could end up not getting the duration that you would normally get, like during the summer, on that battery. So, one, I try to keep my lights charged up. Every couple days I'll recharge them. And two, I use two different lights just in case it's particularly cold and I start to have a battery performance issue with the light. The other thing that you need to consider is, what are you going to do when you get a flat, particularly if you're by yourself. So you can the light and motion lights I use have a strap you can put on your helmet, so you can mount it to your helmet if you wanted to. So your hands are free if you have to fix a flat. You still have light, because that will be critical. If you can't see what you're doing, your odds of finding what caused your flat in the tire casing go way down. Then you could have a really bad day if that's the case. Your other option would be to carry one of those uh, headlamps style that you use for hiking or camping. I also have one of those that I carry in my bag just in case I need it. And so just keep that in mind that you'll need some kind of light you can mount to your head while you're using your hands to maintain your bike and fix flats. Tail lights and reflective elements. I'm a big believer in all of this, and it is effective. Um, when you're going down the Monon, you got all these east-west cross streets, right? Where cars are coming, and you can tell. It's remarkable. If you have the right amount of reflective elements on your bike, these cars will see it and will slow down and stop. If they don't see you, they are not going to stop, right? And then you get this guessing game: is this car going to stop? Do I need to stop? You play that chicken game all the way down the Monon, which I really don't like, but that's the reality of our situation, right? Um, so having reflective elements is critical. Um, I always carry one flashing tail light, and I may always have a second as a backup because they're, in my opinion, especially if you're going to get on a bike lane on the city street where you're going to have traffic coming up on you from behind. Always, I always carry a backup tail light for the same reason about the battery issue. If you're, if it's a rechargeable one and it dies on you, this is a piece of safety equipment. You really need it. You really need it. Unfortunately, I think we're all aware of the bicycling pedestrian crisis we have in Indianapolis. So carry a backup tail light if you can. I recommend, so as far as reflective elements, your clothing can have reflective elements, your shoes can have reflective elements. I'm a big fan of these reflective stickers, and you can even get reflective bands that you can put around your ankle. Um, so the more the better. You can't have too few of those. So reflective sticker, they even make wheel kit reflective stickers. Like if you can put on the rim of your wheels. There's a company called Fix here, Fix Reflective. So you can Google them. I didn't put a link on this slide, I see, but you can get all kinds of reflective stickering: red, white, black, orange, green, purple. You can. So I have a red reflective wheel kit that I bought from them to put on my front and rear rims. So my rims are completely red when I'm coming down the Monon and people come from the sides. They see my red reflective on my rims and they identify me. Hey, that's a bike. I'm slowing down. Um, so just be aware of that. Reflective is your friend. The logistics. Um, so tires, I don't know that you need to buy a specific. I get asked sometimes, hey, do I need to buy a specific winter bike? Do I need to buy a fat tire bike for riding in the winter? I don't have a fat tire bike. I just use my road bikes, and I may change the tire on it. Wider is better. On my road bike, I can fit 30 millimeter wide tires, and so that's what I roll on my road bike commuter. I also have a mountain bike commuter that's a geometry. Um, it's a Surly Ogre, and so I rock a 2-inch wide tire on there, Schwabel Almotions, which have some tread on them. One of the things you can do is run lower pressures. There's a lot of interesting websites out there that will give you recommended pressure based on your weight and your style of rim and tire casing. So, on my tires on my road bike, I generally am around 85 psi on those 30 millimeter wide tires. Tubeless tires, obviously, if you're familiar with that, you can run on my Surly Ogre has tubeless, and so you can run those down well below 30, and so that gives you more traction. Um, Fenders are important, especially if you're going to be riding in the wet um, when it's rained outside and whatnot, to keep that grit off your bike, off your gear. So I do have fenders on my commuter bikes. As far as the logistics of preparing yourself to ride, I lay everything out the night before. My wife doesn't really like it, but I got a spot in the kitchen. We got a little bar counter, and I set all my stuff on that. And the first bar stool is my bar stool, and I hang my jersey and my base layer and my bibs on that bar stool. And so when I come down in the morning, everything is laid out, my bag's packed for my work. It's ready to rock and roll. So I have a routine to efficiently get out because there is a big difference that I find in preparation between riding when you got to put all these extra layers on versus, hey, it's the summer, I got to put on a summer base layer, summer jersey and bibs, and I'm out the door. You're putting all these layers on and you want to time it right, while you're getting dressed. You don't want to overheat while you're in the house. So you're trying to get dressed and out the door. So you don't want to get dressed too early and walk around your house for 15 minutes. That's a bad idea. Right. So just you'll figure out your own rhythm of getting ready. But the more you prepare the night before, the easier it'll be in the morning. And I also find that if I'm prepared, then I get out of bed. I'm like, hey, I'm ready to go. There's no excuse. It reduces the excuses. If you're got everything laid out, ready to go, I've committed myself. I'm doing this. I'm not going to roll over in bed and hit the snooze button. I'm going. Um, and again, if you have stuff that's not rechargeable, you might want to carry some extra batteries in your bag in case you need to replace them during your commute. Learning to love it. Accountability is a big thing. You will be surprised that if you make a connection with other people that are like you, like-minded, other cyclists that want to commute in the dark, want to commute all year, establishing that relationship, you end up being accountable to each other, and you end up riding more because of that. And you end up, having an accountability on when you're going to meet this person and they're counting on you. So therefore, it's a more enjoyable experience. You're conversing. They're there in case you have a mechanical. You can help each other out, which is a great thing. There's also a security element of that, right? Because you're riding in the dark. Some people may not like, hey, there's wooded sections on the Fall Creek Trail, and it's 6 o'clock in the morning and it's dark, and you're the only one on the trail. Some people are like, wow, that's kind of weird. I don't know if I like this, right? So if you find that riding buddy, um, that makes it the security element of it a lot better. Some people find that to be make them a lot more at ease. Then the other thing is when you're riding, like I said, you get these trails to yourself. Once it drops below freezing and the time change hits, there ain't gonna be anybody else out on the trail but you. That's what very few people are out there, so it's quiet, it's nice. You get to see things and notice things that you may not notice during the day or during other times of the year. So it's a you can learn to appreciate that. And here's a picture of the crew. So these are some of the people I ride with to work. And that's it, Connie. Any questions?
We didn't have any questions, but if anybody wants to let's see, we just got one, so let me pull that up. What maintenance routines do you recommend to protect your bike from salt and moisture damage during the winter?
Okay. Well, first thing I would say is that it doesn't really change for me between summer and winter, because the elements of precipitation and your moisture it still happen in the summer. I ride I get rained on because I commute to work. There'd be several times a year that an unexpected storm rolls through just as I'm commuting home and end up having to dump the water out of my shoe when I get home because you're just completely drenched. So I would say my maintenance activity doesn't change. You need to be particularly careful on your chain. That's what I find you need to focus on. So if your chain gets wet because of rain or snow or just moisture getting kicked up because it rained the night before or there's powdery snow on the trail, I mean I'll ride in minimal snow. If we get like 3 inches of snow, I'm not going to ride on the trail. But if it's minimal snow, the I will still ride. There's a whole issue of trail compaction and ice building up under the snow that you may have to deal with if you really want to ride in the snow. Um, but you got to take care of your chain. So what that means is, if I commute and I get rained on or I get snowed on and my chain gets all wet, when you get home, you have to do mandatory. You got to you got to get some kind of towel, wipe your chain off, try it off, try to get the grit wiped off, the surface grit, whatnot, and then relube your chain. So that's just the reality of it. Whether it's due to be relubed or not, it's irrelevant. I lube my chain about every 150 miles. I use a wax system. I use a hot wax system, and then I apply a drip wax by Silka. It's another great Indianapolis company in case you're interested in hot wax lubrication of your chain. You can Google Silka, and they got all kinds of cool videos and products. BGI sells them, by the way. And that's what I would say, just take care of your chain. That's the biggest thing. As far as salt, I don't really have to deal with that because most of my commute's on the trail. So there are some sections of the city streets that I have been forced to ride because of the new bridge downtown. They've shut off the trail in some ways I used to get to work. So I do have to ride on the city streets for, my 13-mile commute. I'm probably on the city streets for 3 miles or so, 2-3 miles probably now. But what I find is if the weather's been bad enough that they have to super salt the streets, I'm probably not going to ride outside to work. That makes sense. So I don't see salt. Salt's not been a problem for me. I don't do anything in particular for that.
Any other questions people have? Yeah, so how have you found new recruits for the Fall Creek Flyers? Mainly word of mouth? And what resources do you seek out from the city to know whether a trail is able to be used or not due to weather?
Oh my goodness. Well, the first question. So we end up a couple different, most of our commuting group, the Fall Creek Flyers, we've been really active. We're probably the most active commuter group in Indianapolis. And for those that don't know, we're kind of on Northeast Siders, right? We start out at the Boy Scout out by Fort Bend and ride down Fall Creek, down the Monon, and on the Cultural Trail and stuff to get to work downtown. Usually, there's two methods for us to recruit. One, we end up recruiting people from work. So, occasionally we'll get new. So at Lilly, for example, I work at Lilly and we have a Viva Engage website for Lilly cycling. And so invariably, somebody new will show up and say, "Hey, I'm interested in riding to work." And I'm like, "Oh, hey, you need to talk to me." And we recruit people like that. So every couple of years, we end up recruiting one or two new people through our individual workplaces. The other thing, um, we're fortunate enough, and one of our members is very much an extrovert, and he likes to stop and talk to people as we're commuting. And so, occasionally, when you're commuting to work, and you notice, hey, I'm passing the same person every time I ride down the Monon when we're riding to work. This guy eventually will like ride up beside me and say, "Hey, where are you going? What are you doing? Where are you riding from?" And he, strikes up a conversation with them. "Hey, you want to ride with us? This is the time we come down. We can meet you here." And so we end up adding new members just from that action of one of our members, talking to people and getting um, you know, conversations going with people that we see on a consistent basis on the trail at the same time we are. As far as resources, do I seek out from the city? Well, I don't know. I don't want to be super negative about this topic. This doesn't happen. That's one of my complaints, honestly. The communication element of it, even with iPhones and whatnot, that's a difficult one. Getting information on when certain construction activities are going to happen and when the trails are going to be shut down. I know there are some people that make efforts to get that communicated out. But For example, when they shut the White River Trail system down and the White River Parkway on the west side over where this new Elanco HQ is going in to put this bridge abutment in, you know, I didn't know about that. And I use that every, multiple times a week. I knew about it the day they put the barriers up and shut it off, right? Which is super frustrating, but that's just the reality of it. That's one of the things I wish could be improved, honestly. So that's my answer to that.
Yeah, a corollary to that also is when there are trees down in
Mhm.
a trail. Like recently, there was a tree that was down on Fall Creek Trail, and there's no real easy way to to report that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, this mayor action thing is difficult, as for those of you
yeah,
who have been on
so
this
yeah,
topic
so
of
it's,
conversation before,
you
that's
know,
difficult to do.
yeah, even if we know that this is obstructing the trail, there's no way to really report it easily, put it that way.
Yeah, I find that when we get into situations like that, the users of the trail end up taking care of business. Unfortunately, so if it's a small enough tree that can be handled by, a public citizen, that's usually what happens first. Somebody, if it's a small tree, they'll try to move it themselves or get a couple people try to move it. If that doesn't work, somebody's going to bring a chainsaw out there and cut it up, cut it and move it. Um, if it's too big, that's where the city has to handle it. If you get a big tree, which has happened a couple times in the last 8 years, where you're talking a tree that's probably 18, 20 inches in diameter or more falls across the trail. That's when the city really has to step up and do it. But it'll lay there for a week or so before it's finally taken care of.
Yeah, we have another question. What types of bikes are best suited for winter riding conditions, and what features should we look for?
The bike you have would be my initial answer. Um, like I said, I have a road bike I use in winter commuting, and I also have the Surly Ogre, which is a mountain bike geometry that can handle, because they have mountain bike rims on them, they can handle wider tires. And so those are the two I use. It just really comes down. I don't think you really need a specific bike per se. It just really comes down to the bike you have and how comfortable you are. Like I said, if you can make a couple minor adjustments, like figure out, okay, what's the max width tire I can put on this bike and still not rub my chainstays, and put on a wider tire, run lower pressures. They've got all kinds of fender packages that you can add that are even removable. Um, SKS makes a bunch of fender packages. Planet Bike makes fender packages. And if you want to add a fender to it, I would go for it. That helps. But I wouldn't say you need a particular bike to ride in the winter. I will say that there are a lot of there are some people that bought the fat tire bikes, those 4-inch wide, 5-inch wide bikes. And if you're a person that says, hey, I'm going to ride this bike off road on, you know, ski trails and stuff, and I'm going to ride it. It's not going to matter. Hey, if we get 3 inches of snow, I'm riding this bike. If we get 6 inches of snow, I'm riding this bike. If that's your mindset, then all by all means get a fat tire bike. But if you're not going to do that, then the bike you have is probably good enough. I would ride that first, and then get some experience and get some feel for it. And if you want to buy a new bike, a year or two down the road, because you want a new bike, hey man, I've got 5 bikes. I don't need 5 bikes, but I got them, and I ride them all.
It's
N plus one, right?
it is a legitimate excuse to get a new bike though, Roy.
It is. Yes, you could see that's the upside. Is your spouse doesn't need to know that hey, the bike you have is okay to use. You know, they don't need to know that, right? Hey, I got to have this bike. I'm going to save. I will tell you, commuting, you save a lot of money on gas. There's Citra has a calculator out there based on the kind of vehicle you have and your commute distance and, what kind of mileage it gets. I mean, you can wear and tear based on the vehicle. They got a nice calculator. You can put that in. And, for me, I'm saving $25 a day every day I commute. based on fuel and wear and tear and maintenance of my vehicle. Not to mention the environmental impact of, carbon footprint and all that. Okay. If you're a Strava fan, you notice if you tag your ride as commute, it will tell you how many kgs of CO2 you saved from going into the environment when you ride your bike to work. So that stuff does make a difference to some people.
I was also going to say one of our partners with the Cycle Commuter Task Force is Commuter Connect, and they have a system where you can register and get potentially matched up with other commuters, whether it's carpooling or biking or bus riding. Basically, there's ways to get connected with other people as well.
Oh, that's a funny story with that, Connie, is, I attended the event down on the Circle last month. I think it was was it Car Free Thursday or whatever? Anyway, I signed a login sheet there with Commuter Connect. And then like I got an email like 2 weeks later matching me up with another bike commuter. And guess who they matched me up with? Myself. Apparently they had me in there under I was in there under a different email. So it actually worked. They sent me an email saying, hey, there's another potential commuter that you could ride with. And I looked and it was me. So funny story.
Yeah, that's funny. Let's see, another question. Any funny or unexpected things that have happened to you while biking in cold or dark conditions?
Funny or unexpected? Well, if it's funny, it is generally related on the people you're riding with, is what I find. So, if you're riding with people, they may do silly things, especially if they're new. Um, they make a mistake in what they're wearing or whatnot. But I don't have anything that jumps out in particular as a funny story. I would say the biggest thing is, I alluded to this earlier that it's super quiet and you're usually the first person out on the trail, especially if you're leaving 6 or 6:30 in the morning. And so you do have an opportunity to see things nature-wise that you normally wouldn't see, like foxes. You ride around the corner and there's a fox sitting in the trail staring at you. That's the kind of stuff you get to see that you normally wouldn't get to see in the summer.
I don't know if everybody saw, it will be in the description as well, but Bike Indianapolis does have a place on their website for trail maintenance and construction updates as they get them. So that's something that you
Oh, okay.
can potentially check.
Okay, super.
Thanks, Connie.
I was going to say, now that I realize Andy's on the phone, back to the funny stuff, I would say as long as we're riding with Andy, there's always funny stuff with the ride because Andy's pretty funny. So he's hilarious.
Wow, that almost sounded like sarcasm.
Well, I'm serious. You make everybody laugh.
Yeah, so one of the things I was going to say is I'm a big proponent of smart wool, merino wool, and I use it under my sweaters during the winter, and you can use it for all sorts of things, but once I'm basically, if it's a cold weather ride I'm on, I am dressed in merino wool from head to toe, and I have merino wool headbands, and I have neck gaiters, and 3 different weights of wool tops, and different weights with wind things in the front for tights, lots of different wool socks, just a bunch of wool. But what's great is, it keeps you warm, but it's also it's machine washable, can put it in the dryer, and You can wear it multiple times if you let it air out. Doesn't smell, keeps you warm. It's all. I'm a big fan.
That's a good point, Connie. And to add to what you're saying is layering, right? It seems to me that every fall going into the winter, I tend to overdress earlier on, and then as we get deeper into the winter, I get better at determining how many layers I need and don't need. But you do have that option that you can take layers on and pull them off to suit your needs. And if you're trying to just stay warm while you're stationary, you may be a little bit overdressed. Has been my experience, that you definitely heat up as you ride. So something to keep in mind.
Yeah, the other thing I was going to say is a long time ago, I had a winter jacket and it just wore out, a winter cycling jacket. And I was going to buy another one. And I found that I can use all of my different layers of wool underneath a rain jacket. And my rain jacket can serve a double purpose, both as a rain jacket, but also as a wind jacket on top of all these different layers. And I've found that that has been super helpful. So I have a really nice rain jacket, but it does, double duty. I don't like riding in the rain, but I have a rain jacket. So if I do get caught in the rain, I can put it on. So, but it really helps on colder days. And I ride with panniers, so I just take it off if I get too hot. Or if I need to strip one of the layers. All right. Well, I want to thank Roy for all of this wonderful information and for the great questions from everyone. And thank you again, all of you, for joining us on our Lunch and Learn. And we will see you hopefully at Ride to the Polls on November 2nd, as well as our future Lunch and Learns. And we also do some bike and breakfast, or our active transportation meetups, as we've now called them, starting next year as well. So look for those, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thanks so much for organizing, Connie.
Thanks, Connie. Thanks, Roy.
Thank you.
You're welcome.